Today, we have a fascinating topic,
Donald Trump and Greenland.
surprisingly central in global security.
Greenland, the world's largest island. I thought it was fake news.
It sounds like a movie plot. Greenland is not for sale. Autonomous means a place that has a degree of independence.
He used the phrase, won't use force.
Sovereignty means having the power to govern yourself without outside control. Included the possibility of tariffs.
What is your view?
No right or wrong answer. Hello and welcome to StoryOrbitEn. I am Jessica.
And I am Tom. Hello, everyone.
Today we have a fascinating topic that might sound like something from a movie, but is very real in world politics. Have you ever wondered why one of the biggest landmasses on Earth became a point of debate between a US president and the rest of the world?
Yes, Jessica. We are talking about Donald Trump and Greenland, which is the world's largest island. But before we dive in, let me ask our listeners this simple question. When you hear Greenland, what comes to mind? Is it snow? Ice? Maybe polar bears? Or something else entirely? Think about it.
I love that question for listeners to ponder. Greenland often seems remote, but it has become surprisingly central in global security conversations. Today, we'll explain the background, the different viewpoints, and some vocabulary along the way, so that English learners can improve their skills while learning about real events.
Honestly, the first time I heard this story, I thought it was fake news or some internet joke.
Same here, Tom. It sounds like a movie plot, not something you expect to hear in real politics.
Right. So let's start with the basics. Greenland is an Arctic island that lies between the North Atlantic and Arctic Oceans. It is technically part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but it also has self-government, meaning it makes many of its own decisions about domestic matters. Denmark controls only certain aspects, like foreign policy and defense. This setup is important to understand the whole story.
That's a great clarification. Let's pause to explain the word autonomous. In this context, autonomous means a place that has a degree of independence or control over its internal matters. Greenland manages much of its own day-to-day affairs, even though it is linked to Denmark for international relations and security. So listeners, you can think of autonomous as self-ruling to some extent.
Exactly. And now, let's talk about the spark in recent headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump made comments about wanting to acquire Greenland.
And when people heard that, many of them literally said, "Wait, what?"
Yes, especially because buying a country is not something we usually hear about in modern politics.
Acquire meaning to take possession of or buy something. For example, you could say, she worked for years to acquire enough experience to get her dream job, which shows that acquire does not only mean to buy something, but also to gain or obtain something over time.
And that is a perfect opportunity to teach a phrase, come under fire. In English, when someone's idea or action is criticized widely, we say it came under fire. When Trump suggested buying Greenland, that idea came under fire from governments and indigenous groups around the world, meaning it was met with strong disagreement.
Listeners, you might hear that in news or conversations about any controversial situation.
So true. What makes this situation unusual is that Trump was not just joking or speaking casually. Later, he said that the United States might want to control Greenland to keep it safe from other powerful countries like Russia or China. He explained this by talking about national security, which means protecting a country from danger, such as war, money problems, or political threats.
Now here is where opinions and interpretations differ, and we want to be very clear to our learners. One side of the argument, that of Trump and his supporters, was that Greenland's location in the Arctic and its natural resources make it strategically important. Because the Arctic is warming due to climate change, new routes and access to minerals are opening up. Some say that if the US does not step in, China or Russia might take advantage of the region. That view says Greenland is critical for defense and economic interests.
Do you understand this so far? If it feels confusing, think of it like this. Greenland is in a key place. It has valuable things, and some countries want to make sure other powerful nations do not control it.
I remember thinking, this argument sounds logical on paper, but emotionally it's much more complicated.
Yes, because maps and resources are one thing, but people and culture are another.
Right, and the other side is the perspective of Greenland and Denmark. They responded by reaffirming that Greenland is not for sale and will remain under Danish sovereignty unless its people choose otherwise. Greenland's government calls such ideas absurd, because the island is considered part of their homeland, and residents want decisions about their land to come from within their community, not from foreign governments.
Think about it like this. Greenland is someone's home, and they want to decide what happens to it themselves.
That's where we can explain a useful phrase for learners: sovereignty. Sovereignty refers to the authority of a state or people to govern themselves without outside interference. When Denmark and Greenland officials say Greenland is not for sale, they are asserting their sovereignty, meaning they control decisions about their own territory. It's similar to saying, this is ours and we decide what happens here.
So it basically means this. A country or a people have the right to make their own decisions, and no one from outside can tell them what to do. When Greenland and Denmark talk about sovereignty, they are saying, this land belongs to us and we choose what happens here. In simple words, it is about being in control of your own home.
That leads us to a key point. Greenland's people, many of whom are Inuit, express that land is not something to be bought or sold in the usual sense. Traditionally, indigenous cultures often see land as collectively used and cared for, not as property to be exchanged like a commodity. That adds another layer to the conversation because it's not just political, it's cultural as well.
Absolutely. And speaking of Inuit perspectives, there have been protests and strong reactions in Denmark and Greenland with slogans like, Greenland is not for sale. These demonstrations show how deeply people feel about their land and their identity.
So now, let's talk about what happened when the idea hit the political world. Trump used rhetoric that included the possibility of tariffs, which are taxes on imports or exports between countries, to pressure Denmark and other European countries to agree to discussions about Greenland. This was seen by many as external pressure rather than respectful diplomacy.
That's a good moment to offer a clarification for learners. Diplomacy is the art of managing relations between countries through discussion and negotiation, rather than confrontation. When people talk about diplomacy, they are usually talking about peaceful communication to solve disagreements.
Let's also stop for a moment and talk about the word tariff again, because it can be confusing. A tariff is extra money that a country makes you pay when you buy products from another country. For example, if a country puts a tariff on cars from abroad become more expensive. Countries sometimes use tariffs to apply pressure or to protect their own businesses.
Do you understand this so far? It's a difficult word, so don't worry. You can think of a tariff like an extra tax added at the border when things move from one country to another.
And honestly, tariffs are one of those words politicians love, but normal people hate.
Yes, Jessica, because it usually means you end up paying more without really noticing why.
Yes. The situation became more serious, and some European countries started to worry about trust. They felt unsure about how strong their relationships still were. Some experts said that these actions could make long friendships between countries more difficult, especially inside NATO, which is a group of countries that work together to protect each other, including the United States, Denmark, and many European nations.
One thing many news reports noted is that Trump later clarified he would not use military force to take Greenland. He used the phrase, won't use force, meaning he would not invade or seize the land by military means. Instead, talk shifted toward diplomatically negotiating access or cooperation related to Greenland.
Remember that from Trump's point of view, the idea came from concerns about safety and strategy. He said the island is in a very important location and could help protect the United States and its allies in the Arctic. He also mentioned that Greenland has natural resources and that stronger cooperation could benefit both countries in the future. In his explanation, the goal was not to take land by force, but to make sure the region stays stable and secure.
Let's flag another useful vocabulary word here. Invade. Invade means to enter a place by force, especially in a military context. It's a strong word often used in history and current events, so understanding it helps learners read or listen to global news without confusion.
So, here's a recap of the key events so far. Trump publicly stated interest in Greenland being controlled or acquired by the U.S., citing what he saw as national security needs. Governments in Denmark and Greenland firmly rejected that notion, emphasizing sovereignty and cultural autonomy. Tensions included threats of tariffs and concerns about military force. Eventually, Trump said he would not use force, and discussions moved to diplomatic channels, though disagreements remain.
This leads us into an interesting English expression, to walk back something. When someone walks back a statement, they soften it or clarify it after initial pushback. In our story, Trump walked back some of his more aggressive statements about tariffs and force, meaning he adjusted his position after international reactions. That's a useful phrase in both politics and everyday conversation.
Indeed. Now let's talk about how many people in Greenland feel about their situation and their history. Some Greenland residents say the relationship with Denmark has not always been fair, especially in the past when Danish authorities made decisions without asking local people. At the same time, Greenlanders today are proud of their culture and independence, and they want to make their own decisions about their land and future. Many still want independence from Denmark, but do not want to become part of the United States.
Here's another phrase for learners: heritage. Heritage refers to traditions, beliefs, and cultural elements passed down through generations. When we talk about Inuit heritage in Greenland, we mean the unique cultural practices and values that have been maintained for centuries.
Listeners, by now you might be thinking, so why does this matter? Well, Greenland's location is strategic, not just geographically, but also politically. It sits in a region of the world that is becoming more accessible due to climate change, and many global powers, the US, Russia, and China, are paying more attention to the Arctic. This means questions about sovereignty, security, and cooperation are all at play.
That brings up another useful phrase: in the spotlight. When something is in the spotlight, it means it is receiving a lot of public or media attention. Greenland is now in the spotlight because of this international debate.
To understand the situation better, it also helps to look at a bit of Greenland's history. Greenland has been home to Inuit peoples for thousands of years, long before any European country arrived. These communities lived from hunting, fishing, and a close relationship with the land and nature.
Later, in the early 1700s, Denmark began to establish control over Greenland. At that time, Greenland became a Danish colony, which means it was ruled from outside, and many important decisions were made in Denmark, not locally. For a long period, Greenlanders had very limited power over their own political and economic life.
Over time, this relationship slowly changed. In the 20th century, Greenland moved away from being a colony and became more politically involved in its own governance. In 1979, Greenland gained home rule, and later, in 2009, it achieved self-government, giving it much more control over internal matters like education, health, and natural resources.
However, Denmark still manages things like defense and foreign policy, which is why Denmark is still officially responsible for Greenland at the international level. Because of this long history, some Greenlanders feel grateful for support from Denmark, while others remember difficult periods and want full independence in the future.
So when we talk about Greenland today, it is not just about one recent political idea. It is also about history, identity, and a long journey toward having more control over their own future.
And this is also not the first time the United States has shown interest in Greenland. In fact, the idea goes back a long time. The US started talking about Greenland as early as the 19th century, not long after it bought Alaska.
There were a few moments in history when the idea came back. One important example was in 1946, when the United States officially offered Denmark money to buy Greenland, but Denmark said no. After that, the idea disappeared for many years and only returned recently with Trump.
So when people hear about this today, it may sound shocking, but historically, it is something the US has thought about several times over more than 100 years, especially when Greenland was seen as important for safety or global strategy.
So let's go over some useful vocabulary we've introduced so far. Autonomous, meaning self-governing. Sovereignty, meaning authority to govern oneself. Tariff, meaning a tax on goods between countries. Diplomacy, meaning peaceful negotiation. Invade, meaning to enter by force, to walk back, meaning to soften a previous statement. Heritage, meaning cultural traditions, and in the spotlight, meaning receiving public attention.
Now, as we approach the close of today's podcast, let's reflect on listener engagement. Think about these questions. Have you ever heard of geopolitical topics before? Can you try to use one of those words in a sentence? Like, the government walked back its statement after criticism?
That is a great exercise for learners. And to recap one last time, Greenland is a large island with increasing global attention. Donald Trump's public interest in acquiring or controlling it stirred international reactions. Countries like Denmark and Greenland's own leaders emphasized sovereignty and respect for self-determination. Discussions shifted from aggressive rhetoric toward diplomatic talks about cooperation and shared security in the Arctic. Through this conversation, we learned new vocabulary and expressions that can help you understand and discuss global affairs in English.
Now we'd love to hear from you. What is your view on the situation? Do you think it would be a good idea for the United States to try to buy Greenland? Or do you think Greenland should stay fully in control of its own future?
There is no right or wrong answer here. Tell us what you think in the comments. And if you can, try to use one of the new words you learned today. We're excited to read your ideas.
We hope you enjoyed this objective and conversational exploration of the topic.
Thank you for listening to StoryOrbitEn. Practice your English every day and explore the world through language.
See you next time. Bye.